So it's a unbelievable good preservation of this enclosure, which had been erected by Stone Age people so long ago, and which is still existent now here.
It's recognizable. We have the natural limestone plateau here, and all this mound, which is not a natural mound, which is an artificial mound.
Klaus Schmidt spent 20 years as one of the most respected archaeologists in the world. Careful, conservative, the kind of scientist who only said what he could prove. Then, 3 weeks before he died, he sat down with a documentary crew and said something that made them stop recording, ask him to repeat it, check if he was serious. He was. What Schmidt revealed contradicted everything he'd published, everything he'd built his career on. His colleagues called it a breakdown, but Schmidt called it the truth, a truth so disturbing that the academic establishment would never accept it. 3 weeks later, he was dead. Heart attack, no warning. Within 48 hours, his research vanished. The site was sealed in concrete. So, what did Klaus Schmidt actually find? What was so terrifying that it got buried along with him? Let's find out. The discovery that changed everything. In 1994, Klaus Schmidt was just another German archaeologist doing survey work in southeastern Turkey. Nothing. Glamorous, no fame. Just meticulous documentation of ancient sites that most people would never hear about. The site was called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill. Previous teams checked it out in the 60s and wrote it off as a medieval cemetery. Some broken stones, maybe an old graveyard, nothing special. Move along. But Schmidt saw something in the survey data that made him stop cold. The hill wasn't natural, it was man-made, entirely artificial, and it was old, impossibly old, the kind of old that doesn't make sense. He started digging in 1995, expected to find maybe a Neolithic village, some pottery, stone foundations, the usual stuff that fills museum basements and academic papers nobody reads. And get this, what he actually found made his whole team go silent. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, 10 to 20 tons each, arranged in precise circles, carved with intricate animal reliefs. Lions, foxes, scorpions, snakes, vultures, not crude scratches, detailed, sophisticated, the kind of work that takes master craftsmen and generations of developed skill. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The organization was complex. The sheer scale was staggering. And the dating broke everything we thought we knew. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment. So, here's the deal. That's 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids, before agriculture, before pottery, before writing, before metal tools, before animal domestication, before literally every single thing we use to define civilization. Here's what the textbooks will tell you. Humans back then? Small bands, nomads, living hand-to-mouth in temporary camps. No organization, no engineering, no specialization. Survival mode, 24/7, chasing animals across frozen landscapes, gathering berries and roots, just trying not to die before the next sunrise. They were not building 20-ton monuments. They were not organizing. Labor forces of hundreds. They were not creating symbolic art that would survive millennia, except they were. Because the evidence was right there, exposed in the Turkish dirt, staring back at the archaeological establishment. Impossible to deny. Impossible to explain away. Schmidt published his findings and became a rock star in archaeology. National Geographic, documentaries, textbook rewrites, universities fighting over him. For a few years, Klaus Schmidt was the man who rewrote human history. Göbekli Tepe got labeled the world's first temple, proof that religion came before farming, a revolution in our understanding. But here's the catch. That story was comfortable, safe. It expanded the timeline without flipping the table completely. It made humans more impressive without making them inexplicable. Schmidt gave hundreds of interviews pushing this narrative, papers, tours, television appearances, but privately, something was eating at him, something that got worse every year. Colleagues noticed he wasn't sleeping. Dr. Jens Notroff, who worked alongside Schmidt for years, said there were nights Schmidt would just stare at excavation reports, muttering that none of it added up, that they were missing something fundamental. The deeper he dug, the less sense anything made. The impossible construction, The first problem was the stones themselves. These weren't rough monuments hacked out of rock by primitive hands. They were precision carved, perfectly balanced, geometrically exact. The T-shape was identical across dozens of pillars, as if manufactured to specifications. The animal carvings weren't primitive scratches. They were detailed three-dimensional reliefs, anatomically accurate, naturalistic poses. The kind of work that belongs in a Renaissance workshop, not the Stone Age. This level of skill should have taken generations to develop, centuries of trial and error. You'd expect to find earlier attempts scattered across the region. Cruder versions failed. Experiments, a learning curve etched in stone. There was nothing. Göbekli Tepe appeared fully formed. No predecessors anywhere in the archaeological record. No developmental sequence. Like the builders showed up one day, already knowing exactly what they were doing. Like they'd done this before. Somewhere else, somewhere we haven't found. In 2009, Schmidt told a German archaeology conference the site appeared without antecedents. He said it violated everything we understand about how technology develops, how skills accumulate, how civilizations grow. But here's where it gets wild. The construction logistics didn't work either. Each pillar weighed 10 to 20 tons. They were quarried from bedrock a quarter-mile away, carved with stone tools, no metal, transported uphill over rough terrain, positioned with millimeter precision in circles that required advanced planning, erected without cranes, without pulleys, without wheels, without any of the mechanical advantages we assume are necessary for such work. The mainstream explanation? Massive human labor, hundreds of people pulling ropes, logs used as rollers, sheer determination and religious fervor. And get this, Schmidt actually did the math. Meticulously. Obsessively. He calculated population density for the region at that time based on environmental carrying capacity, caloric requirements for sustained heavy labor, hunter-gatherer lifestyle constraints that meant every able-bodied person needed to spend most of their waking hours just finding food. No surplus, no specialization, no leisure time for monument building. The numbers came back wrong, badly wrong. There weren't enough people in the entire region to quarry, carve, transport, and erect these stones while also hunting and gathering enough calories to not starve to death. Not possible, not with stone tools, not without agriculture supporting a settled workforce. And yet, the stones were there, standing. Undeniable. In 2011, Schmidt admitted publicly at the University of Edinburgh that they could not explain how Göbekli Tepe was built. Not within current understanding of Neolithic capabilities, not even close. The room went quiet. Nobody challenged him, because nobody had an answer. But the construction mystery was just the beginning. What they found next made it look like a footnote. The degradation mystery. As excavations continued year after year, Schmidt's team uncovered more enclosures, deeper layers, older construction. And here's the thing that made everyone's blood run cold. The deeper they went, the more sophisticated the construction got. This was backwards. Completely backwards. In every other archaeological site on Earth, you find crude early work at the bottom, getting progressively refined as you move up through the layers. That's how development works. That's how humans learn. Practice makes perfect. Skills accumulate. Each generation builds on the last. At Göbekli Tepe, reverse. The oldest enclosures, buried deepest, showed the most advanced construction, precision cuts, perfect geometry, master-level carving that would challenge modern sculptors. The most recent layers showed decline, smaller stones, sloppier arrangement, cruder carvings, techniques getting worse, not better. Like watching a civilization forget how to build, like watching knowledge drain away generation by generation. Göbekli Tepe wasn't developing, it was degrading, and nobody could explain why. Schmidt tried explaining this publicly. Maybe the site's importance declined over time, maybe skilled workers migrated, maybe religious fervor faded, but he knew that was garbage. Privately, he admitted it made no sense. Why would skills decline at a sacred site? Why would each generation be worse than the last? Why would the pattern be so consistent? In 2012, he gave an interview to a small German archaeology magazine. What he said changed everything. He said he'd started thinking they weren't looking at the beginning of something. They were looking at the end. Schmidt believed Göbekli Tepe was the final achievement of a culture already dying. The builders had knowledge and capabilities that were being lost, generation by generation. They built this as a memorial, a desperate attempt to preserve something slipping away, a last-ditch effort to leave something behind before the lights went out completely. So here's the deal. Schmidt was no longer describing humanity's first temple. He was describing humanity's last attempt to remember something. And then he started finding things that should not exist. The forbidden artifacts. In 2013, excavating one of the deeper enclosures, Schmidt's team discovered a small chamber beneath the main floor, carefully sealed with fitted stones, hidden for 11,000 years. When they cracked it open, one team member later said the air felt wrong, heavy, electric. Inside was a collection of objects. They looked like tools, but not like any tools from that period. Schmidt's personal notes described them. Smooth, geometrically precise. Some stone, some an unidentified material, not functional in any obvious way. They do not cut, grind, pound, or scrape. Perfect forms, too perfect. We do not have a category for them. He showed them to colleagues. Dr. Harold Hauptmann, a veteran Neolithic specialist, examined them and went pale. The immediate response was denial. Later, intrusions, natural formations, worker hoaxes. But here's the catch. Schmidt's excavation methods were bulletproof. The chamber had been sealed since construction. Zero contamination possibility. The objects showed clear tool marks. They simply should not exist in 9,600 BCE. Schmidt sent samples to labs across Europe. Results came back confusing. Some objects contained trace elements that didn't match local geology. One piece appeared to be a copper alloy. Copper metallurgy wasn't developed in that region for another 4,000 years. Labs suggested contamination. Schmidt ran more tests. Same results. He tried publishing. Papers rejected. Reviewers said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Schmidt stopped trying to publish. He didn't stop investigating. If you want to keep uncovering what they've been hiding from us, hit that subscribe button now. Because what Schmidt found next is the part they really don't want you to hear. The underground chamber. Klaus Schmidt's final excavation season. Nobody knew it would be his last. His team was working the lowest level of the site, enclosures that radiocarbon dating put it possibly 12,000 years old, maybe older, the deepest anyone had ever gone at Göbekli Tepe, territory that had been sealed for millennia. They were excavating around a massive T-pillar when ground-penetrating radar picked up something strange beneath the bedrock. It wasn't solid underneath. It was hollow, not natural caves formed by water erosion, not geological anomalies, carved chambers, regular, geometric, right angles, extending deep into the earth in patterns that looked deliberate, designed, engineered. Schmidt made the call to dig, the decision that would define his final months. It took weeks of painstaking work. They had to partially disassemble the enclosure above, shore up 20-ton pillars that could crush a man in seconds if they shifted wrong, work inch by inch into the cavity. Every day felt like defusing a bomb that had been set 12,000 years ago. One team member, speaking anonymously years later, said the deeper they went, the quieter everyone got. The jokes stopped, the small talk dried up, like they could feel something was wrong before they saw it, like the earth itself was holding secrets it didn't want to give up. What they found in that chamber changed Klaus Schmidt forever. In a letter to a colleague, written with hands that witnesses said wouldn't stop shaking for days afterward, Schmidt described it. We found a chamber, walls smooth as glass, dimensions precise to the millimeter. In the center, a structure. I do not know what to call it, a machine, an altar, something between the two. Made of stone, but stone that has been transformed somehow. It contains symbols, not written language, not pictographs, diagrams, mathematical representations, nothing we recognize from any period. Then came the line that still haunts researchers who've seen that letter, and it is still active. Active. According to team members who were present, the structure emitted a low hum, constant, subsonic. You felt it more than heard it. Electromagnetic field detectors went haywire. Compasses spun randomly, unable to find north. Several researchers reported splitting headaches that lasted for hours, disorientation, nausea. One geologist claimed he had nightmares for weeks afterward, vivid, recurring, always the same images he couldn't explain. Schmidt documented everything, hundreds of photographs, detailed sketches, measurements down to the millimeter. He brought in outside experts, geologists, structural engineers, physicists from the Technical University of Munich, anyone who might have an explanation. Nobody could explain it. The chamber walls showed no tool marks, none. As if the stone had been melted or molded rather than carved, like someone had access to technology that could soften rock. The central structure appeared to be a single piece of shaped bedrock rising from the floor, which should be impossible. You cannot shape bedrock in place without removing it first. That's basic physics, basic geology. And yet, there it was. And then there were the symbols. They covered every wall in precise rows, not pictographic like the animal carvings above, abstract, geometric, mathematical. They reminded Schmidt of circuit diagrams, star charts, but more complex than anything modern. Patterns within patterns, systems within systems. Dr. Klaus Christoph, a specialist in ancient mathematical systems, analyzed the patterns using computer modeling, found regularities suggesting deliberate meaning, repetition with variation, the hallmarks of language or code, but nobody could crack it. The symbols predated writing by 6,000 years, and yet someone was clearly trying to communicate something. Someone with a level of abstract thinking that supposedly didn't exist yet. Someone who wanted future generations to understand. Schmidt's final warning. In his final interviews, recorded weeks before his death, Schmidt was asked point blank what Göbekli Tepe really was. His answer made everyone uncomfortable. The interviewer later said Schmidt's eyes had changed, like he was looking at something nobody else could see. He said it wasn't a temple, he called it a facility, an installation, part of a network we're only beginning to find, built by people with knowledge far beyond anything we attribute to that period. The interviewer pushed. People? Or something else? Schmidt was careful, said he wasn't claiming aliens. That's too easy. He said we simply don't know what humans were capable of 12,000 years ago, just assumptions that fit our narrative. Göbekli Tepe proves those assumptions are completely wrong. Whoever built this understood geometry, astronomy, engineering, possibly sciences we can't identify. They were as sophisticated as us, maybe more. And then something happened. That knowledge was lost. Civilization collapsed, not for the first time, but for the most recent time. 3 weeks before his death, Schmidt gave his final statement. He said, "We've been here before. Human civilization has risen and fallen before recorded history. What we call the first civilization is actually a rebuilding after collapse, and whatever caused that collapse could happen again. Göbekli Tepe was built by survivors, trying to preserve knowledge for the next cycle, for us, and we're not listening." The cover-up. On July 20th, 2014, Klaus Schmidt died of a heart attack while swimming near the excavation site. 61 years old, no history of heart problems, no warning signs. Nothing in his medical history suggested this was coming. The timing? Just weeks after the underground chamber discovery. Some believe the stress broke him, others aren't so sure. They point to the timing, the way everything got locked down so fast. But here's what happened next, and this is where it gets dark. Within 48 hours of Schmidt's death, the underground chamber was sealed by Turkish authorities, declared structurally unstable, too dangerous. The entrance got filled with concrete, permanently. Ground-penetrating radar studies, prohibited. Criminal charges for anyone scanning the deeper levels. Schmidt's photographs and notes vanished. His family was told they were confiscated as state property. Every access request denied. His widow spent years trying to recover his research. Nothing. The objects from the sealed chamber were shipped to Ankara for analysis. Never publicly displayed. Never described. Official. Reports call them of limited archaeological significance. Limited significance. Copper alloys from 4,000 years before copper metallurgy. Limited significance. The German documentary footage was seized at the Turkish border. Only audio transcripts survived. Göbekli Tepe is a tourist attraction now. Walkways, gift shops, signs explaining the world's first temple. Families taking selfies in front of pillars that might be screaming warnings we can't hear. In academic circles, Schmidt's later claims get quietly dismissed, the tragic decline of a once rigorous scientist, they say. But researchers who kept digging point to early radar studies showing massive structures still buried. Only 5% has been excavated, 95% remains underground. Similar sites discovered across the region. Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan Tepesi. Same impossible sophistication, same era. A pattern nobody wants to explain. And get this, the Göbekli Tepe carvings show comet impacts, catastrophic floods, mass extinctions, astronomical configurations that researchers at the University of Edinburgh mapped to cosmic events around 10,800 BCE, right when ice core data shows the Younger Dryas impact event, when temperatures crashed globally, when megafauna went extinct, when something hit this planet hard enough to reset civilization. The carvings aren't decorations, they're records, warnings. So, here's the question nobody wants to ask. What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't built before civilization? What if it was built by a civilization that got destroyed? What if Schmidt's terrifying truth isn't that ancient humans were smarter than we thought? What if it's that we're not the first, that civilization has collapsed before, that we're living in the aftermath of a forgotten apocalypse, reinventing wheels already invented, relearning sciences already mastered? And what if those warnings carved in stone were meant for us? A message from one civilization to the next. A desperate attempt to break the cycle. Schmidt spent his final year trying to make us understand. He abandoned academic caution, risked everything, watched colleagues turn their backs. Then he died. His work got buried. The chambers got sealed, but the pillars still stand. The message is still there. Encoded in carvings we refuse to read. Hidden in chambers we've filled with concrete. 95% remains buried beneath Turkish highlands, waiting for someone brave enough to dig, waiting for someone willing to listen. And if Schmidt was right, we don't have forever to start. Do you think Schmidt was silenced, or was this just tragic timing? And if Göbekli Tepe really is a warning, what do you think it's trying to tell us? Drop your theory in the comments below. If you want more forbidden archaeology, smash that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started.